Hey, how's it going? So today we're going to be doing a much more relaxed, very different type of video. We're going to be taking my main board here. We're going to be making some changes. Mainly going to be taking off this RJM Mastermind. It was really useful when I was doing a lot of sideman work, being able to recall presets and playlists for several different artists. However, since the pandemic, I haven't been doing that much in the last couple years. And as I'm gearing up for this next album, I want to be able to try and swap in different drive pedals mainly. And this board is kind of set and not really easily interchangeable. So we're going to be making some room, allow it to be a little messy. Part of the reason I built that fly rig board was kind of in preparation for this year to be able to keep my main board in the studio really messy, be able to swap things in and out. So there's going to be a lot of kind of background hanging out, grab a coffee, grab a beer, and I'll stop kind of in between and talk about some of the things that I'm doing and some of the decisions I have to make. So I'm using a flathead screwdriver here. A really small pry bar would work as well, but since I use power grip or dual lock, these pedals are really securely on here, and the first thing we need to do is kind of get everything loose, start unplugging cables. We're going to be cutting zip ties. We're going to be unscrewing some of these pedal risers, again, just to keep things intentionally messy so that they're easy to swap in and out. Everything's just going to be going in series, and so we got to start popping some pedals off. Alright, so now I have removed the risers from the board. We have a whole bird's nest of cables here, and so the next thing we got to do is see if we can keep some of this cabling. It's kind of a risky thing to not start from scratch, but in the interest of not removing everything possible, especially because these Strymons are going to stay exactly where they are in about the same order. One big thing that I'm doing is I am putting a Bogner Harlow here as my compressor that's going to happen after the drives. Previously I was using the Vertex Nile, which I still love, but after playing the fly rig that I built that utilizes that Bogner Harlow, I'm just constantly reminded at how much I specifically love that pedal, and so I think it's going to be the mainstay compressor after drive, so the post drive compression, and I'm going to keep the Strymon OB1 as my pre-drive compression, and there'll be a whole video coming soon on the Bogner Harlow. So let's see if we can tidy up some of these cables. All right, so now I've sorted where all the cables are going. We've left the cables that didn't need to be removed. And what I'm going to do now is just kind of throw together a combination of drives here that I like, feel comfortable with, and they're just going to be really messy on here. I'm probably not even going to dual lock attach them. Everything's just going to kind of be resting on the board here. And again, the main reason for this is to be able to start swapping things out in order. I'm somebody who hasn't started out stacking overdrives quite a bit, and then over the last probably 5 years I have not stacked overdrives very much at all. I really want one drive to do one thing, and what I'll do is I'll either boost it from the OB1 with a flat, a mid, or a treble boost on the front end, or if I want to boost after it, I'll use the Boss GE7. This is really a studio tool, but I use it as my clean boost as well after drives, and I'll usually tailor it depending on how I'm going to use it on a particular gig or on a song-to-song basis, mostly as I'm tracking things in the studio. So right after I said I wasn't going to be locking anything down, I am going to be locking this Bogner Harlow down because again, it's going to live up here for sure. It's going to live up here. Everything down here, the drives and stuff, is what's going to be changed. This is going to be a staple along with these Strymons and the graphic EQ. Alright, so as you can see, I have kind of pieced together a handful of drives here. I've been rocking predominantly Vertex drives for a couple years now, which I love the aesthetic of them being in the same enclosure. Basically, the majority of the board has been Strymon and Vertex. Still love both of those companies, but as far as drives go, there are some key pieces that I think are going to be instrumental in this album, and the goal is to take, you know, these 8 drive pedals and kind of swap in a few others. I've probably got 5 or 6 others that I'm going to rotate out, but these are the ones I'm going to start with. And the main thing that I'm going to be doing is kind of ruling out pedals that when I set them the way that I want them, the tone that I'm looking for out of that specific pedal, when I achieve that for each of them, the ones that are way too similar, that are doing the same thing but maybe different perspectives, kind of making some hard decisions there, and then keeping the ones that I decide on, rotating in some very different drives and fuzzes with those. And so this is going to be a long process. We're going to do some shootouts eventually. This board is not going to sound awesome clean because we've got so many pedals running. The cabling is not very clean looking or clean from an audio perspective. Hopefully this Bogner Harlow will help with some of that degradation that we're going to get just running through all of these pedals, even though only one may be on. This is a lot of feet of cable in this board. Everything's very sloppy, moves around, but that's going to allow me to just kind of pull a pedal and quickly swap it out. I'm not going to be doing any heavy stepping on these pedals when they're in this state, just because there's so much risk in damaging cables, damaging jacks in the pedals themselves. So I definitely don't recommend keeping your board this way unless you're going to be really intentional about very gently engaging the pedals, and if it's for a purpose. Keeping a board messy like this needs to serve a purpose, and really the only purpose that it can serve is to allow you to constantly be changing things in pursuit of something. We all know we'll never land on the ultimate pedal board that never changes, but we go through stages. I'm pretty consistent with my boards, and once I accumulate a handful of things I really have to have, typically I'll just build another board rather than trying to constantly change one once I get it where I want it. So this is going to be the board in process. My main board now is going to be my fly rig board, just the kind of grab and go thing, and we're going to be trying out a bunch of these pedals. But first, let's see if I've successfully done this. I didn't test any of these cables. They were all functioning before I tore it apart, but when you start moving things around like that, you always run the risk of there not being signal passing, and then it's the tedious process of finding that. So let's see if we get power to everything, see if we can pass some signal, and then hopefully this was a relaxing, maybe hopefully informative video for you guys. Alright, so first we're testing the power. Looks like Strymon's have power, EQ, Harlow has power, the interfacer, the audition box that sits under this. The audition box is kind of irrelevant for this board now, but because it was just already looped in, I left it in, but likely I'll just be changing things here rather than through this audition box, because it sits after all the drives, before the volume, volume into Harlow, EQ, then Mobius, Timeline, and Big Sky. So here I'm just making sure we have power to everything. Alright, so we've successfully have power to everything that needs it. let's test some signal. Alright, so we definitely don't have signal passing, so now we start the tedious process of figuring out where I screwed up plugging in the right cables. Again, this is something that I anticipated because we didn't take everything off, we weren't starting from scratch, and we weren't cleanly running any of these cables. Which I see a problem right now. I totally missed a patch cable here, so let's see if we get lucky and this solves our issue. Alright, so we have signal passing. Let's just listen to what this clean tone sounds like just with the camera mic here. So let's just do a quick test with everything off, and I bet even at this super low volume, with everything off and just using the camera mic here, we'll be able to hear a difference in running straight to the amp and minus all of this cable running through all of these pedals, even just when they're in bypass mode. So you can hear it's a lot more open. We're losing quite a bit of high end and some dynamic range just running through all these pedals and all this cable. But for the purposes of listening to these drives, kind of making decisions, we'll be able to compensate for that both with the pre-drive and the post-drive compression. We also have the EQ here, so we can try to get as close as we can to the clean signal with everything off, running through all the pedals. I'm actually a little bit surprised it's not worse than it is, but nonetheless, it's definitely noticeable. And so this is all, again, with the purposes and the goal of finding the handful of drives that are going to be really utilized on this next record, kind of creating a new drive section, and then we'll add a switching system here so that we can clean up a lot of that high-end roll-off just with cable capacitance, also get rid of some of the noise, speaking of. And we will also be able to do things like run the 3 Strymons up here in parallel rather than in series. That's something I've been really wanting to do for a while now. And so this is kind of the first step, is figuring out what the drive section really needs to be, and then building a board based off of that core drive section, and then my core staple pedals with the wah, volume, EQ, pre and post compression, and then my 3 Strymons here. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If this is the kind of content that you enjoy, please like and subscribe to this new channel. For now, I've been Colin. Gotta hydrate with vodka.